My plan was do an episode 0 where I explain what we're doing to an audience and to you, so we settle on the plan in real time.
Good. Let's just try it out.
This is my sister, Evangelion and me, a media analysis podcast in which I try to convince my non-anime consuming sibling that Neon Genesis Evangelion is one of the greatest pieces of modern art produced in our lifetime. That's the tag, baby. And I'm going to do it.
That's pretty good. Easy audience.
So I'm Josh. I'm not what people would call a weeb, I don't think. Somebody asked me about this recently. Like, they're like, you're an anime guy, because if you go look at my social media feeds, for some reason, I just really like to sort of meme on the few animes that have had a huge impact on my life. But like, I maybe watch one new one or repeat one like a year. I'm not like voraciously consuming every piece of anime that is made. And I think Neon Genesis Evangelion stands above the fold, above most art, and especially above most and all other anime. And my goal is to watch it with you and convince you of the same.
Okay. Well, it won't be hard to convince me it's the best anime, as I have not watched any anime except for a handful of Dragon Ball Z episodes against my will when I was about 13 years old. And you were 9.
It was a little later than that because it was coming out when I was in high school, but I would schedule the VCR to tape them at midnight because they were censored when they aired during the day and we were at swim practice. I would tape Gundam Wing and Dragon Ball Z, and that was sort of my introduction to anime. A little earlier than that was Sailor Moon when I was probably 11 or 12, which was very sexually confusing.
I think I've heard you and Layla talk about that.
We discussed this on another podcast that I used to do. My co-host was also a Sailor Moon
On
fan.
some episode, you'll have to have her guest star so you can talk about it again.
Like maybe as an aside episode to discuss. I'm not like a master on that. The one Dragon Ball Z was an obsession. Gundam Wing was an obsession, and then a show FLCL or Fooly Cooly, which is still my obsession. I put out English translation covers of songs by the band that the soundtrack for that show is pulled from, The Pillows, and they're on YouTube, and people seem to enjoy them. Thank you, my Twilight. Thank you, my Twilight. Thank you, my Twilight. So I was into that in college, and then like there's a few others I've enjoyed along the way. Death Note I just found recently. Other than that, Evangelion is like the big anime, and I tried bootlegging it when we were kids on we had like a Pentium 4 tower computer and like a 56K modem, and I tried downloading bootlegs, and I'm glad I didn't get past more than 1 or 2 episodes because it's way better as an adult than a kid. Maybe explain your relationship with we know you're not an anime person, with media. Your taste, rather.
My media taste. I didn't know I have to talk about myself.
Just to set up like where you're coming from, as we which I should say, my goal is to watch the series Evangelion and then the movie End of Evangelion, and then there's a series of 4 movies called Rebuild of Evangelion. And it sounds like a lot, but it's really maybe 14 to 15 hours of content. I don't know the total runtime, but something like that.
That's like the amount of content I watched in a year, but that's okay.
It might take a year. But anyway, okay, so back to your media consumption or taste.
Okay, so let's rewind back to the year 2000. Josh watches Dragon Ball Z. and pre-records it. I pre-record some Dawson's Creek.
I was just gonna say, I was like, it's gonna be Dawson's Creek.
My first boyfriend, Joshua Jackson, Pacey, if you
Mhm.
will. And Josh one time accidentally taped over an episode of Dawson's Creek I had not seen yet with his midnight tapings of Dragon Ball Z. This is like something you could only have happen in a very like a decade and a half,
Yeah, there's a window of about 5 to 10 years that this could possibly
maybe
be a problem,
15.
and we circled that square.
Yeah, that was probably one of our biggest arguments as children, so that's we did good.
I don't remember this at all.
I mean, it wasn't so much as an argument as it was me flipping the fudge out and you cowering away to the computer room.
Sounds right.
Yeah. So, I never got into anime, but I too have spent a lot of time analyzing media. As, once upon a time in undergraduate school, I also was a media major, but also a literature.
We were qualified to do this because we both went to undergrad for how to watch television.
I highly recommend it.
There's no, like, you can't waste money in
If
any
you're
better
getting a
way.
liberal arts degree, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, if you're getting a liberal arts degree, you're wasting money. Just do it in something fun like watching TV.
Exactly. I did it in that and books. So, I read a lot. I'm a librarian.
Which I think is also conducive to, like, you live in an anime orbit, because
Yes.
every time I go into a library, the teen section is full of kids drawing manga, or reading manga, or surfing the internet looking at anime related stuff. Do I have
Well,
that?
that is incredibly accurate. All teen librarians are well-versed in anime, I would say. I mean, I wouldn't even go into the field of teen librarianship unless you like anime and manga and those sorts of things, 'cause those are your prime
It's like
audience.
90% of what you do.
Yeah,
Is my
but
guess.
I mean, I love the teen librarians I've worked with, and, they're always very enthusiastic and th like, part of my bridge to them is like, "Oh, yeah, my brother likes that stuff." I know what Dragon Ball Z is. I know the word Evangelion, and they're like, "Oh, wow, you really know something." I'm like, "Sure."
So that's why I was like, you know what? I feel like I could do this. If there's one person I can sell who is totally, like, uninitiated, unbaptized, it's you. And that's my goal. And the thinking, we briefly had a discussion that, like, if we get through this series and we have fun with it, we can put you in the driver's seat and you can try to sell me on something.
So many ideas.
So you've got 15 to 20 hours of content and podcasts to figure that out.
I think I know already. Will not spoil it, though.
My idea for this show is, I think, and anybody who's watched Evangelion will probably understand why. I'm thinking we watch the first 2 episodes and do an episode. And then maybe we'll try one episode at a time. So we'll watch the episodes, and, like, if people want to book club along, they can watch. We'll say which one we're going to watch, and then we'll come on. We'll get your reaction to what you saw, and just unfiltered, however it is. Then we'll go through, sort of analyze the episode, and then see if your reaction has changed at all by the end.
Cool.
Then, yeah, we have to do the same thing. We have to do the last 2 episodes together, which when you see them, you will understand why.
Okay. Okay.
And again, anybody who's seen it, they absolutely know why as well. And they're having, like, a little nerd smirk right now.
Like I have no idea what happens in anime. I don't know if you realize how unfamiliar I am with this genre. It's like we're at a show, like a concert, and I'm pretending I know what hardcore is or something. I don't know, it's hard to explain, but it's something like that. It's like I know the names of things, but I don't know what happens. I don't know.
Hardcore is honestly kind of a good example because I feel like I found myself in my 20s at a lot of hardcore shows where I'm like, I bet this is really fun if you know the band and you know the words, but without that, I'm totally lost and I'm
Yeah, that's exactly it. Like, as a pop punk rock kinda kid, you're used to something being, hooky, fast, and then, like, that's always been my problem. I'm like, "Yeah, cartoon's great. Anime,
yeah.
what?"
So this is the gentle guidance that somebody needs to get into the world because I'm not coming at it as like a weeb dork. I will probably watch the Japanese subtitled episode, and then because I have no life, I'll rewatch the English dub one for each time we do a podcast. You could totally just watch the English one. I'm not a purist like anime fans are. If that turns you off, fine. Go find another Evangelion podcast. I've tried them. They stink. Not really. There was one I
Wait.
found that was okay.
You Okay, so that's something I'm not used to. Wait, I've never watched anything dubbed in English that I can think of. I mean, I'm sure I have, but, like, I watch subtitles.
Oh, I mean, you can watch either one, but like they did a pretty good job dubbing this into English. Like I remember I tried watching Squid Game with the English dub on, and live action is really bad. Like I watched like 3 minutes of it with English dubbing before I had to go to subtitles. I was like, this is really bad. But this show, Netflix redid a English dub of it. They knew it was like a darling cult thing, so they did, I think, a very good job of it. Um, there's some weird stuff where they tried to make it so um, honest to the source material that they say weird phrasing sometimes.
Not the best translation.
It's like purposefully translated more correctly than it needs to be. The big one that people notice right away is the three main characters will be referred to often as the first, second, and third children in the singular. So the first children, the second children, when they meet the first child, the second child, the third child. But you'll catch on. It's not that complicated.
Sounds
It's
complicated.
really not.
I'm so nervous.
The last thing I want to ask you about before I go into some of my historical setup is what do you think this show is? What do you think you're in for? What do you think's gonna happen?
I have no idea. I know literally nothing about it. I haven't even watched, like, a trailer. I don't know what it looks like. I just, I'm picturing random anime graphics. What I think most anime is about.
Tell me.
So I'm picturing, like, FLCL, which I did not watch, but I've seen, like, some scenes of it, where I feel like there's some sort of giant company overlord that comes to town and some little guys that fight it.
That's for somebody who's probably only seen 2 minutes of that show, that's not a bad analysis.
For
And I think
FLCL.
I think I already said that show is made by Gainax, the same animation studio that made Evangelion, minus its creator, Hideaki Anno, who is like key he's the key to the gate of the whole thing. It's like
Mhm.
it's like a 25-year deep dive psychoanalysis of himself and like the world around him. I can't think of like any piece of artwork that compares to it in like in terms of scale and personal commitment. And yeah.
You're really selling it. I'm hoping there's Gundams, but I'm not sure there are.
Oh buddy.
Are there
Hold on to your
always
pants.
Gundams in anime?
Well, I'll do so Gundam is a series of giant robot anime that started in the late 70s, and there's a lot of series of Gundam that are like I think
Oh,
usually 20 to
yeah.
30 episodes long. But like giant robot anime is a genre, and this show is in it. Question marks?
Ooh, I hope so. Is there a mech? There better be a
Jess.
mech.
Oh man. Oh man. Hold on to your pants again. I'll just say there's something. All right. So I want to set the scene for the way I interpret this show without giving any spoilers. Just to set up where I'm coming at this from. And everything I'm about to explain, this is not a history lesson. There's better podcasts for that. This is me painting broad strokes of history with a watercolor brush like a Monet and just the way I see it.
If you squint at it.
Yeah. But for that purpose, we've got to go back to World War II.
Heard of it.
Do you know the story? I have to remind myself his name of Hero. I think it's Onda. You may have heard it in world history class in high school.
I don't think I remember it.
All right. So this guy, Hiro Unda, was stationed in the Philippines. World War II in Japan ends because we dropped the 2 atomic bombs. The story loosely goes that the Allied powers, they thought, well, we'll be in all the island hopping for years, trying to hunt down every last Japanese soldier. So let's just drop these nukes and decimate this country and bring them to their knees. Hiro Unda is stationed in the Philippines at the time. He doesn't know that those bombs fall. He's a Japanese soldier. And he keeps fighting until 1974.
That's insane. I feel like I vaguely remember this story.
So multiple people come out and tell him, Hero, the war is over. Go home. And sometimes he murders them. Other times he says, you're not my commanding officer. And here's the important part. Japan would never surrender until every Japanese soldier and general was dead. Therefore, the war is still going on, and you're lying to me.
That's amazing.
So they literally had to hunt down his commanding officer. Double check me again. Watercolor painting this. I don't remember if these details are 100% correct. But I'm pretty sure they hunt down his actual commanding officer to like come out and decommission him when they find out that he's like terrorizing this Philippine like jungle for 30 years.
Oh my God. That is some serious trauma.
So that story has been told to me. I think it's told this way in setting up the series in Hardcore History on like Japanese Empire and its history. And I'm pretty sure our world history teacher told it for the same reason,
like he did,
to explain just how like deeply ingrained in the culture nationalism and honor are to the Japanese people.
right?
Right. And before this, you have thousands, hundreds to thousands of years of the Bushido Code, which is most analogous to like what we think of as like chivalry, but it's sort of like the code of honor under which like samurai operate.
Right.
And it's like pretty strict in some forms. So like, yeah, you have a like very proud, very nationalistic culture, and they think they're going to become this big empire as they axis powers, and they get decimated by 2 bombs. So now we have in America, we're booming. We're having a great time after World War II. We're partying. We're living it up. We're all buying houses. We're all going to college for like $10. And Japan's like, everything we stood for 1,000 years was destroyed in 2 days by 2 bombs. And like, doesn't have like a national identity. And so what kind of happens is I think of it as they're like 30 years ahead of us in terms of like cultural decline. So what started to happen was the rise of what's called otaku culture in the like 70s and 80s. Do you know what that is?
No, I'm guessing it's incel culture.
People like will kind of equate it to what we think of as incel. In the 80s especially, from what I understand, it's like they had kind of a similar thing going on where like we had satanic panic over kids playing Dungeons and Dragons, and they had it over like otaku culture of guys like watching too much anime and playing too many video games, becoming antisocial. So enter creator of Neon Genesis Evangelion, Hideaki Anno. Described by some as like the king of otaku culture. He gets his start. He's always been drawing. He's always been an animator. He gets his start working on some Hayao Miyazaki movies, which is Studio Ghibli, which
Mhm.
is, I was just visiting your family. We watched My Neighbor Totoro,
Mhm.
one of their most famous movies. So he worked on a few of those. He co-founds Gainax, the studio. They make some shows. And then he's deeply depressed for 4 or 5 years in the early 90s.
Aw,
He's a hot mess. And the way he decides he's going to get out of it is to make Neon Genesis Evangelion.
that's a good idea.
So, the way I view this series is there's kind of three parts of the creator, well, we can just call him Anno, sort of like bearing what he's processing about his relationship to otaku culture. The original series from 1995 is him just sort of like processing that initial depression, and I don't want to give too much away, but uh yeah, it's sort of him getting through it.
Gotcha.
Then the fans hated the way he did it. The otaku like culture that he was sort of the king of,
Oh, no.
like they send him death threats, like they hate him because of how this series plays out without saying too much more. So then they're commissioned to make a follow-up movie called End of Evangelion. And this movie is him putting up two big middle fingers and giving the bird to all of otaku culture, just being like, fuck you guys. This is what you want? Fine. And it's one of the greatest movies ever made, and it's deeply disturbing and uncomfortable to watch.
Oh, dear. Oh,
It's
well.
brilliant.
I'm down.
Yeah. Then in the mid 2000s, he starts what's called the Rebuild of Evangelion series, which they pitch as like, oh, we just want to redo the show with better technology. Now we have like 3D technology. And people think like, oh, okay, cool, whatever. It's 4 movies. The first movie, you're like, yeah, okay, some stuff's a little different. And then the second movie, he says, you know what? My relationship to this culture, to this show, to everything has changed. And I'm going to reflect that in the show. And it takes a total 90-degree turn and becomes something else where he has a new message, which we could discuss if we get there. That I see as like, it's like a warning to the rise of like the otaku thing in America, this sort of like
Hmm.
idle male. It's like him reckoning with his past with it, and I think sending this warning out to the rest of the world of like, you guys, if you obsess with this stuff, your life's gonna suck and it's gonna mean nothing. So like everything past the original series is kind of him trying to tell the fans, move on with your lives, but still like making this very like incredible art. It's wild.
Huh.
That's my Monet's Lilies painting of what Evangelion kind of means to me.
Okay. Okay.
Did any of that track?
I think it does. I think it does. I want to know otaku culture is sort of so like in post World War II Britain, you have the angry young men generation that you get like Clockwork Orange out of, and I think maybe the Wasp Factory and some other like
Yeah, they
literatures where I'm familiar with it from.
no,
Um,
that's a good comparison that was sort of happening analogous. It's interesting that I guess they fused it into sort of like punk rock a little.
yeah, because I mean, and it would have been a different type of decimation. I mean, like Great Britain was on the winning side, but they also experienced the Blitz, so I don't know. But I think that they, there was pretty industrialized poor parts.
Yeah.
I think it had more to do with class than it had to do with national identity.
And I was trying to find, when like kind of vaguely researching this, like why like anime, like why animation took off so much in Japan, animation and comics versus the rest of the world. Because like the video games thing makes sense because they pivoted their economy towards electronics as their thing of like, this will get us out of this mess of like
Hmm.
being destroyed in that war. It's interesting, the otakus of Japan are like our parents' age, like the boomers. Whereas like our
Yeah.
boomers are like, they were just like, we're having sex and doing drugs. And they're like just the most selfish generation, in my opinion, in terms of like, they're like, we had it easy, we had it good.
They're
And you
like
see
the
that, like you
least
bring up the example of like,
self-aware.
yeah, lack of self-awareness is the best way to put it. Yeah, that hopelessness is reflected in like you're relating to like British culture, and the Japanese infuse it into obsessing earlier than we did in America with anime and video games, etc. And it like continues to this day. Like they struggle to get people to have children, like
Yeah.
I don't know if their population is officially declining, but that is a like nationalist concern that they have, is like no one's getting married or having sex. And I feel like here in America, we're just following that same pattern, probably like 15 to 20 years behind.
Yeah. I
And
mean,
Evangelion just like speaks to all of that for
hmm,
me in a very weird way.
that's really interesting. Yeah, it's really wild that it seems to come with the video game culture for some reason.
What do you mean?
And also I think there's like always a fear for young men.
Yeah, I think like, well, and especially like in Japan, it's like we didn't have a nationalist project. And I don't think nationalism as it is evolved is good. That's
No,
uh in modern times. But like,
nationalism bad.
yeah, but like there is no sort of national or cultural project to point young men toward. And in America, we spent 20 years on Vietnam, which was a waste. But in Japan, they're just kind of like, I don't know. Here's some comic books. Here's some video games. Keep yourselves occupied and don't cause too much trouble. And it creates, yeah, fellas like Hideaki Anno. And now our economy in the US all got shipped away, and we're having the same problem. What do you do with all these guys who it's like, we have nothing to do with our lives except fill Amazon boxes for people who have more money than us,
Right. Right.
So we're like reflecting the same thing now, and it's very, very interesting. But that all being said, this is also to set up. There's a lot of what they call fan service in the anime world in the show,
Okay.
which is
Is that the sexy stuff?
the sex stuff. Yeah,
Ew.
the sexualization of teen girls. Yeah, this is just to like set you up that it's there, and it's weird because the fandom is still pretty much just like, oh, these teenage girls are hot, and they're all like my age, and that creeps me out.
They're also cartoons.
Yeah. So there is like this weird, I don't, like men who know they should grow up and be attracted to women their own age. It's almost like they see it as like some like backdoor like loophole into like still being attracted to younger women. It's like, well, they're just cartoons. It's not
I'm gonna have to see it to have more of an opinion on that. I don't
yeah.
know, because they are just a cartoon, but, like, even just being attracted to a cartoon in general is odd.
And let me say, the show makes a point to say you guys are disgusting for being obsessed with this. But at the same time, these animators, it's like their kick to like draw women in very like sexualized positions and motions. So there's like this sort of like give and take play with it. And it's like also you're seeing it from the perspective of a 14-year-old boy.
Hmm.
It captures that very well in a way. And like the only example I could think of that tries to like frame that point of view that comes to mind for whatever reason is this like the movie Superbad.
Oh.
Like because there's so many like gross like sexual teen romps, and like Superbad seems a little more self-aware of it being problematic than most of those movies were, as best as I remember. I feel like it's
It's
probably pretty
definitely
problematic.
problematic, but I feel like it was a little bit aware of it.
Yeah, it was very much like this is the perspective of teen boys, and like I see the show that as like the same way, and
Yeah.
like these animators who never stopped being teenage boys.
Yeah.
Because like there is a lot of that wild tension of adolescence involved and like relationships. It's like a lot about that. So
Mm.
that's the preface there of there's some weird, awkward, uncomfortable, horny stuff.
That's fine. I'm down with weird stuff.
So that's like all I wanted to set up is so the next time we do this we'll watch episodes 1 and 2. And like
Okay.
I said, we'll get Steph's reaction of what just happened? What's going on? I don't plan for this to be like encyclopedic because who fucking cares? Maybe the last thing I should get out about myself is so in college I took a script analysis class that has just stuck with me it like better than anything else that I ever did in my educational years. That the takeaway was basically like if it's in the script that the writer put in there, it has to happen. And beyond that, whatever you internalize about a work is what it means to you, is what happens. And so for that reason, I hate fan theories about like actually so and so's dead the whole time. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah,
Where
I
people are
think
like,
so.
oh, this can be extrapolated to mean that and this, and like things that are like not even named in the show. Like if it appears on screen or it's spoken, then it's canon. Outside of that, I don't fucking care.
Well,
You know what I
outside of
mean?
that, I feel like it's fun speculation. It's reader's response is what we called that in the lit world, where it's like, that's not what the author intended, that's not so quick lit analysis as I
Yeah.
remember it 20 years later. But, yeah, you have your literature analysis realms. One of them is strictly trying to understand exactly what the author wanted and understanding the author and how they wrote and what they were thinking and reading about the author.
My watercolor brushing that I was doing, that was me explaining kind of the way I related to what I think the author was
Right,
getting at with this.
right. So it's like yeah. And then there's and reader response is like, "Oh, well, whatever the reader can gain from it and get out of it and glean from it and make up and spin off on their own almost is, like, valid." One of my favorite examples of this is, The Great Gatsby. There was a literary theorist or literature, I don't know, PhD or something somewhere, who wrote an article, like, in the last 10 years that Gatsby's passing as white. He's actually black, and he's passing as white. And, like, you can read the text as, like, a passing novel. If you've read enough, like, African American literature or black lit, you can read it
Yeah.
that way, but he's not saying, like, that's what Fitzgerald meant it as, but in a way, like, Gatsby definitely is passing, like, he's passing as a different class, which in
Yeah.
America
That I
goes
agree
with
is
race.
in the text,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Anyway, that's one of my favorite examples of, like, reader response or
Yeah.
maybe bringing, like, a black lens to it.
My understanding of the script analysis stuff I was talking about before would be like if it says in the text, it'd be like, okay, if it's a stage play, if it says Gatsby, a white man, it'd be like, okay, that has to be a white guy, right? Uh, but if it doesn't say that, then absolutely you could play it any way you want.
Like Chandraland.
What's Chandraland?
Like Bridgerton.
You have to fill me in on that
Oh
because
my god. This is where my sister part comes in. Bridgerton is a Regency era romance novels made into television series on Netflix by Shonda Rhimes. So instead of Regency era, they would have all been, think Jane Austen, what have you, big skirts, dance cards, etc. They would have all been white because they're all like rich white people in Great Britain mostly. But
okay,
Chandra
I'm catching
cast
up.
them of various ethnicities and races.
Yes, I've seen enough clips of Bridgerton now to know what you mean.
There we go.
Just like you'd seen enough clips of the other thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or like my example I was going to give, so like Shakespeare, there's not tons and tons of like stage direction as far as I remember from like whenever I last read it. So I saw Hamlet where they recast Hamlet as a woman. So they did change pronouns. But then there's like a lot of other interesting stuff where they played with there's like a grave digger who I'm pretty sure he's like supposed to be singing, but he's singing like his lines as like a very like Motown, like modern kind of thing because it doesn't say, "Hey, you can't do this."
Mhm.
So this is all to say, like, Evangelion is maybe endlessly fascinating to me because as somebody who likes to do that sort of strict script analysis, it is the most, it means whatever it means to the individual piece of art I've ever consumed.
Hmm. Cool, cool,
It can
cool.
mean a whole wide berth of stuff to any different person. So I set up a bit of like what it means to me. We'll find out what it means to you, if anything. Maybe it's just a bunch of nonsense.
It could be.
You said you like robots. Maybe there's robots. I don't
Yes.
know.
I like robots. I specifically like giant robots that a person has to get inside to control.
Oh boy, howdy. Okay.
Mechs.
I'm just going to say for the
Gundams.
third time, hold on to your pants.
Woohoo!
All right. So this ran longer than I intended. So I want to wrap up and hopefully anybody who made it this far is down to join us. I'm sure we'll record a bunch of these so that we can put them out like weekly once we get comfortable with it.
Cool.
So whatever day this comes out, a week from then, watch episode 1 and 2 and rejoin us. And yeah, man, just get in the robot. That's all I have to say.
Oh no. Can't wait.
Shinji, get in the goddamn robot.